Okay, we are going to get started. I think a few additional participants are joining, but I'm going to start us off today. My name is Jessica Ramey Stender, and I use she, her pronouns. I am the policy director and deputy legal director at Equal Rights Advocates, and we are proud to chair the Stronger California Advocates Network, which is a coalition of organizations from all around the state of California. We came together over a decade ago and we came together with a shared vision of bringing together different organizations, some of which have their own coalitions that are all working to advance economic security and realizing that we had more strength in numbers. And our legislative agenda that we come together around every year has five key pillars that essentially frame many of the barriers and obstacles that we see to women and families and really communities as a whole achieving economic security. When we came together 12-ish years ago, were facing a lot of challenges for women and families and communities. We know that right now, those challenges are exacerbated by the current administration. And so, what we are so proud of as a Stronger California Coalition is that we are able to both pivot and respond to the current federal context and the current federal attacks and defend against them and protect those communities that we've always advocated with and for. But at the same time, we don't let that dictate our agenda. And so we still push for broad and bold policy reform to advance the rights of women and people across the state and try to advance economic security for all in California. We're going to turn first to just show you our wonderful speakers. We have organizations represented from all around the state, and my colleague Kel O'Hara is going to give you a bit of an intro to the different pillars that we organize our agenda around each year, and then the wonderful speakers that are here with us today. So I'll turn it to Kel.
Thanks, Jess, and hi, everyone. Stronger California is organized around five key pillars. Those are, our North Stars in terms of the work that we're doing. Our five pillars are one, ensuring fair pay, job opportunities, and workplace justice. Two, expanding access to affordable quality early childcare and education. Three, supporting family-friendly workplaces. Four, building economic security by combating poverty and building assets. And five, protecting health and reproductive justice. I'll introduce the speakers as we go through each pillar, just to make things a little bit easier. But we're really lucky to have folks from all these different issue areas represented in Stronger California, and many of them here with us today.
And so we're going to start with the fair pay and workplace justice pillar. And we know that communities, women especially, but other communities continue to experience pay inequities, discrimination, harassment. And that is what this pillar is about, ensuring that we combat those barriers for women and people across genders at work. And so I wanted to start off with some good news. And that is, and I think a Stronger California first, we have already had our first bill from this pillar signed, passed and signed into law. Earliest I think we've ever seen a Stronger California win. And that bill is AB 2155. It is authored by Democratic Majority Leader, Assemblymember Aguiar Curry. And what it does is address a really growing trend, which is that for most people, we think that if we're harassed or experience discrimination at work, don't get paid the minimum wage, or experience some other workplace violation, that we can go to court to seek justice for that violation. However, the harmful reality is that in the US today, a growing number of workers are forced to sign agreements just to get hired, just as a condition of being hired. And that's often buried deep in hiring paperwork. And those agreements say that if they do experience a workplace rights violation, that they are not allowed to go to court, and instead they have to go to a secret forum that is usually stacked against them and private called arbitration. And that forum almost very often favors employers, and employees really are often on the losing side of that. We have seen some progress in trying to limit this forced arbitration and trying to give workers a choice, but very limited. So, under federal law, there are two important exceptions to forced arbitration. First, certain transportation workers are not, they cannot be forced to arbitrate. They have to be given their day in court. And second, the second exemption is that because of the passage of the Ending Forced Arbitration of Sexual Assault and Sexual Harassment Act at the federal level in 2022, workers who have experienced sexual harassment, sexual assault can no longer be forced to go to arbitration. They have to be able to have their day in court. And the issue was that the California arbitration law did not have those similar exemptions built into it. And so we were seeing that some employers were trying to use that loophole to force transportation workers or sexual assault or harassment survivors who would have been exempt under federal law, who would not have been required to go to arbitration under federal law, trying to force them under California law to arbitrate. And so, what this bill, AB 2155, does is it aligns California law with federal law and it fixes that misalignment to ensure that those workers who are not required to go to arbitration at the federal level are similarly protected here in California. And so, with the both passage and now signing of that bill into law, we have taken a really important step forward to ensuring that workers no longer have to choose between getting a job, earning a paycheck, and preserving that basic right to seek justice in court. So that is our first win, and we're going to put some information about that in the chat if you'd like to read more. The next bill that I want to highlight on this pillar is another priority of ours that is still moving. And, we hope that with this webinar, you all kind of learn more about the priority bills that are still moving and are so motivated by how important they are that you'll support us in the final push to get them across the finish line and then signed by the governor. And so this bill is AB 2495. It is authored by Assemblymember Ash Kalra, and it addresses a really troubling reality that we have seen increasing in these current very scary times for immigrant workers in the United States. And we've seen it being cropped up in California. And that is that in California, we have very strong anti-retaliation protections, meaning if you speak out about a violation of your rights, I wasn't paid minimum wage, I was harassed, and your employer takes some type of negative action against you, firing you, paying you less, otherwise harming you because you spoke out and took that protected action, you have a protection under our anti-retaliation law. They're not allowed to do that. But what we've been seeing in this current very scary climate for immigrant workers is some bad actor employers taking advantage of that fear and essentially trying to chill workers from even coming forward in the first place and using a worker's immigration status to essentially scare them into not speaking out about a workplace right violation. And so what this bill does is explicitly prohibit employers from coercing workers to not speak out, to not take action through unfair immigration related practices when they're intending to really silence the workers. So it expands our existing labor protections to make that type of what we call immigration related coercion unlawful, so that they cannot take acts, employers cannot take acts to try to dissuade employees from speaking out. We are near the finish line, and we will send out information afterwards for you to voice your support to California senators who are going to be seeing this bill very soon on the floor, so that you can ensure they hear from you about why it is so critical to pass this bill and then ultimately get it signed by the governor to really set the gold standard for immigrant workers' rights in our country.
Thanks, Jess. I'll introduce our next two speakers on this pillar really quickly. First, we're going to have Ida Rodriguez from the Solis Policy Institute, a fellow with the Solis Policy Institute, which is a program of Women's Foundation California. We're also going to hear from Megan Abel, who's the Vice President of Advocacy at Tech Equity. I will pass it to Ida.
Hi, everyone. Like Cal mentioned, Ida Rodriguez, she, her, pronouns. I'm a fellow with the Solis Policy Institute. Our bill this year is AB 2624, authored by Assemblymember Mia Bonta. And this is essentially the expansion of the Secretary of State's Safe at Home program, which has been here for nearly 30 years. It started with domestic violence victims and has expanded to other vulnerable populations. At this point in time, just following on Jessica's topic of immigration, we know that anti-immigrant sentiment has risen, unfortunately, in the past year under the current federal administration. And what we're aiming to do is protect the immigration support service providers, employees, and volunteers that provide, but it's not limited to legal advocacy, education, community organizing, case management, mutual aid, and other services, who are continuously facing doxing, courthouse, targeting, online harassment, anti-immigrant vigilante coordinated campaigns. And in our case, I have a teammate who works for Chirla, who they're continuously facing death threats. So what we aim to do is provide them with some tools to protect themselves so that they feel not just safe in the workplace, but ultimately also safe in their in the sanctuary of their home. And what this program provides is address confidentiality, a substitute mailing address, and other legal tools in the case that they are doxxed with the intent to harm themselves or loved ones. In its current status, we are in Senate appropriations. We are optimistic it's going to get out. And this has caused quite a bit of, brought a bit of attention. Unfortunately, we had the attention of Nick Shirley, who's a right-wing person. And it has rallied, thankfully, a lot of Democratic support. So we're just hoping that with this bill passing, we can provide some additional safety protections for immigrant support service providers. We know that their support to our immigrant communities across the state is extremely valuable and upholds our communities and keeps them safe and thriving. So thank you for the opportunity. I will follow up with ways to support.
Great. Well, good to be here. I'm Megan Abel, Vice President of Advocacy with Tech Equity. We're a research and policy advocacy organization that works to ensure that the tech-driven economy works for all of us by holding the tech industry accountable for the economic harms that they create in our communities. We're proud to co-sponsor AB 1018 alongside SEIU California. This is the Automated Decision Safety Act authored by Assemblymember Bauer Cahan. It's a 2-year bill and it's currently awaiting a vote on the Senate floor. AB 1018 will provide people with really important rights and more transparency about the use of a type of technology called automated decision systems. These automated decision systems, ADS, use direct and inferred data to make recommendations or decisions in critical aspects of our daily lives, housing decisions, healthcare decisions, employment decisions. And without transparency, ADS might be using biased or inaccurate data to determine whose resume gets selected for an interview or whether an employment claim is approved, for example. And these biases and inaccuracies can cause real harm. In Michigan, 40,000 people had their unemployment benefits revoked due to an automated decision system inaccurately flagging their cases as fraud. When Amazon built an automated decision system for their hiring practices, their tool scored women's resumes worse. The tool disfavored resumes of those who graduated from women's colleges or participated in women's sports, for example. Without the transparency that AB 1018 provides, it's harder for us to enforce our existing civil rights. So, this bill will ensure that people get basic information about this ADS, notice that they're being screened by the technology, and information about what data was used so that inaccuracies can be corrected and biases can be addressed. I'll follow up with more information in the chat about how you can support this effort.
Thanks, Megan. We're going to move to our next pillar, and that is expanding access to affordable, quality, or early childhood care and education. As I'm sure working parents in this room are aware, childcare can be prohibitively expensive, and this fact can keep a lot of working parents from actually being able to rejoin the workforce. Obviously, this is an economic security issue. Also dealing with things like making sure that providers are given fair pay. If there are childcare shortages that are a result of these, providers not being paid appropriately, that's also contributing to these issues. And so that's why this is something that's on our economic security agenda. To talk about work on this pillar, I'm going to pass it to Jennifer Greppy, the Director of Parent Policy at Parent Voices California.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Cal. I appreciate the introduction. And, we all know that access to quality, affordable child care services that are, what that parents are allowed to sort of choose the types of programs that they want and need for their family is really one of the most critical supports that families need in order to work and go to school and for their children to grow and thrive. And so, this year in the budget process, we had, a really big battle on our hands. As you know, there's a lot going on in the state budget, and there's not enough money um, to fund all of the things that families need. And so, we really had to make sure that parents' voices and the community of advocates let the governor know just how important these services are for our family. And you know in the January budget, there was really nothing for childcare providers or for families. There was no new spaces. There was no increase in pay. And so, we had to do the hard work and get out there and show just how much these families needed these services. And so, in the end, after lots of advocacy, and as you can see, over 900 calls from families and 500 emails to legislators, and, a budget letter that was authored by Cecilia Aguiar Curry to demand that we fund the promised childcare spaces. We were able to secure in a final budget 6,800 preschool spaces that were slated to be cut in the January and May budgets. So we were able to secure those and keep them and restore them, as well as 22,770 new affordable childcare spaces, meaning vouchers for families to go choose the type of childcare program that works best for them and their family. And what I will say is that means about 30,000 families will have their lives changed forever. These are families that have been on a no hope waiting list for years, sometimes longer. And for those families, these spaces mean that they can actually move their whole lives forward. And so it is life changing and huge. And it's a big victory for families that we're really excited about. The other thing that happened in this budget is that we were able to secure a 2% COLA, which is up from a zero number that we locked in for childcare providers. This is smaller than we had hoped, and it is not as much as we know that providers need in order to pay based on the true cost of care, which is a fight that we are still fighting through AB 1981, the Aguiar Curry bill on rate reform. And I have put in the chat some more information about that bill and other childcare information. Finally, there were some disaster relief dollars that were allocated in this budget. As you know, there's been multiple different disasters that have happened over the last couple of years that have impacted childcare. The LA wildfires, but also other floods and fires in other areas. And so there was, about $35 million or so that was allocated to people who are impacted by disasters. I will end this by saying that none of this happens alone. We have really amazing partners in the childcare space, whether that's the Child Care Law Center, the Center, the Child Care for, the ECE Coalition, and the California Budget and Policy Center, who have been really great partners in this work and have helped move the child care budget wins along. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jen. Next, we're going to be moving to our supporting family-friendly workplaces pillar. This is about the policies that working families need to stay successful in the workplace and to be able to take care of their families and keep their jobs. Things like job protected and paid family leave policies, workplace accommodations, flexible work schedules, things like that. So on this pillar, we're going to be hearing from Jane Caceres, the communications manager at California Work and Family Coalition, Tony Triguero, a legislative consultant for the California Teachers Association, and Mariko Yoshihara, legislative and policy director for the California Employment Lawyers Association. And I will pass it to Mariko.
Thanks, Cal. Yes, I also have the great privilege of representing the California Coalition for Worker Power, CCWP, a member of the Stronger California Network. And one of our big victories this year was securing funding, more funding for the California Workplace Outreach Program, also known as CWOP. And if folks aren't familiar, this is a program that started during COVID times, when really it was hard to get really important information about vaccines and sick days to vulnerable communities. And so really recognizing that community-based organizations are the best messengers for educating workers on what their rights are, and often the best equipped, the most culturally, linguistically competent to connect with these hard to reach and marginalized communities. We've really built out an infrastructure, a partnership with these community-based organizations and the Department of Industrial Relations to do this important worker outreach work. So since then, we are currently in CWOP 6.0, so the sixth iteration of the CWOP program. We have been fighting to continue this funding, and ultimately this year we were able to get a three-year commitment so that's $30 million of funding per year for 3 years, and a sort of tacit agreement that if, the health of the fund, because the funding comes from the Labor and Workforce Development Fund, a special fund, if that fund is still healthy after 3 years, then there will be an additional 2 years of funding, and then we'll be back at trying to continue to fight for more funding to keep this program ongoing. In terms of implementation, we right now have 89 organizations that again are doing this important work with deliverables, now including like flyer outreach and canvassing. And we're looking at expanding the scope to include more capacity trainings for organizations. Obviously, right now with this Trump administration, we know that there are more attacks on workers, especially immigrant workers. And so this work really is more important than ever. There's a ton of really great research really showing how this model is so successful. I know other states are trying to replicate it. So right now, I'm really happy to say that we have more resources now to ensure that workers have, that they know what their rights are. They have the help and assistance to help them enforce those rights through the CWOP program. And I just want to thank our partners at Stronger California, as well as like a lot of other coalitions that really helped with this effort, and our budget champions, Assemblymember Ortega on the Assembly side, and Senator Smallwood Cuevas on the Senate side, and really some great support from our budget sub-chairs, Assemblymember Cork Silva and Senator Richardson. So huge win for us, and yeah, just want to thank everyone for their help.
Great. Next, we're going to hear from Tony.
Oh, and Tony, you're on mute.
Okay, I'll start again. Hi, everyone. Thanks for letting us share our interest in AB 65 with you. It's currently in Senate appropriations, and the chair is requesting it to continue to move. This bill requires public school employees for certificated and classified employees and community college districts for an academic or classified employee to provide up to 14 weeks of fully paid pregnancy disability leave for employees who are unable to work due to pregnancy, miscarriage, childbirth, termination of pregnancy, or recovery from these conditions. This language is identical to what is currently in the budget, being operational as of January 2027. There is a couple of little glitches that remain. This program is being funded to schools through a discretionary funding source that not all school districts are eligible for. So we have to tweak going forward how we get those handful of districts the same appropriate funding that other districts are getting. And again, as I said, the author, Assemblywoman Aguiar Curry, is requesting the bill to continue to move through the rest of this session in hopes of cleaning up whatever issues remain. So I will conclude my remarks there. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jane with the California Working Family Coalition, and I'm here to talk about SB 1149 by Senator Durazo. SB 1149 would update California's bereavement leave law so Californians can grieve the death of a chosen or extended family member. Grief affects our mental, emotional, and physical health, and no employee should be expected to work at full productivity as they cope with the loss of a loved one. Currently, eligible workers can take bereavement leave to grieve the death of a immediate family member. That means workers are not protected if they need bereavement leave following the death of a family member, such as an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, a niece, a nephew, unmarried partner, or best friend. No worker should be denied time to grieve simply because their family relationship is not recognized by the law. SB 1149 will make California's bereavement leave more equitable by allowing workers to take job-protected leave following the death of a designated person who is a chosen or extended family member. This simple change will align California's bereavement leave laws with other state sick and family leave laws that are already in place, and currently SB 1149 is on suspense in Assembly appropriations.
Thank you, Jane. I was going to just add, this is really exciting for us as a Stronger California Coalition because it builds on past priorities that many of you who are in the audience and who have supported the Stronger California agenda for years helped to get through, which was additional protections to recognize chosen family in California's leave laws. So want to just give a shout out to everyone who has supported those past efforts to ensure that everyone's family members, whether related by blood or legal relationship or just chosen family, are recognized and that workers have the right to take leave when they need it most for those family members. So thanks, Jane, for that.
Thanks, Jess. Next, we're going to be moving to our Building Economic Security by Addressing Poverty and Building Assets pillar. Pretty straightforward part of an economic security agenda. A few speakers for this one: Megan Abel, who you heard from earlier; Rebecca Gonzalez, Senior Policy Advocate with Western Center on Law and Poverty; Keely O'Brien, a Senior Policy Advocate also with Western Center; and me, Kel O'Hara, Senior Staff Attorney with Equal Rights Advocates. We can go to the next slide. So we wanted to highlight another set of wins for you this year, and that is wins in the progressive revenue space. So as some of you may be aware, over the past couple of years, there's been a real push for more progressive revenue solutions here in California. And what do I mean when I say that? Looking at more equitable tax and revenue systems that will help us generate the money we need to fund essential social safety net programs, especially in light of federal cuts. There's a lot more we can be doing here in California to make sure that everyone is paying their fair share, like large corporations, to make sure that we're able to make sure that everyone is healthy and thriving. The final 2026-27 state budget included a few new revenues that are projected to raise over $5 billion ongoing. I won't touch on all of them, but a few of the key measures that we saw in there. One was a tax on business tax credits. So there are temporary business tax credit limitations through 2029. Starting in 2030, there will be more permanent tax credit limitations, a sales tax on pre-written software products, a federally compliant managed care organization tax. For folks who aren't familiar, an MCO is a tax fee levied on health insurance plans That helps fund the Medi-Cal program and then also helps draw down matching federal funds, so further increases the money in the system. We also saw progress on the Fair Share from Big Corporations Act. So as of this budget, there's a requirement for the Department of Finance to provide draft bill options to hold large corporations accountable for employees on Medi-Cal by March 2027, so that those employers would need to help contribute to the Medi-Cal program. So obviously this is great progress. We were really happy to see a lot of these wins, but there's definitely more to do. One of those things that is on our Stronger California agenda this year, and that we expect to probably come up again next year. We're not entirely sure yet, but it's looking like maybe we won't move this year, is AB 1790. That's a Connolly bill, and that's closing the water's edge tax loophole. That is the largest tax loophole in California. It's essentially allows companies to use offshore accounts to avoid tax liability or the same type of tax liability here in California. And if we were to close that tax loophole, we would raise over $300 billion in state revenue from that change alone. So there's a lot more left to do. Definitely keep your eye on closing the water's edge loophole and other revenue solutions in the years to come.
And I just jump in, right? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Keely O'Brien. I'm a senior policy advocate with the Western Center on Law and Poverty, and I'm very grateful to be here presenting to you all on AB 2299, a bill that we are a proud co-sponsor of, along with several other great organizations and with support from many of you. So as many of you already know, we're currently facing the largest cuts to federal food assistance in American history. CDSS estimates that 707,000 Californians are about to lose their access or already started losing their access to CalFresh food assistance as a result of these cruel cuts. That includes 34,000 humanitarian immigrants here in California, including refugees, asylees, survivors of trafficking, nearly half of whom are children, seniors, or adults with disabilities. So all of them are actually already excluded from CalFresh. It also includes more than 600,000 Californians impacted by federal time limit work rules, which also includes 49,000 parents with children ages 14 to 18 who have never been considered, obviously, adults without dependents before, because as everyone here knows, children ages 14 to 18 are definitely still dependents. So as a result of these cuts, children, parents, seniors, unhoused people, foster youth aging out of the system, veterans will all lose critical food support that they rely on to get their groceries. So when that happens, we know that families will be destabilized. They'll be put at an increased risk of child welfare involvement and homelessness. They'll face a higher risk of missing rent and utilities, means increased power shutoffs, more evictions. It also means for kids, their graduation rates and their test scores will drop. SNAP improves high school graduation rates by 18%. So what's going to happen when all these kids age 14 to 18 don't have as much SNAP benefits in their house anymore? We also know that healthcare costs are going to worsen for everyone. For food insecure children are 2 times more likely to be in poor health. Food insecure adults spend 45% more on healthcare. For seniors, they're 23% more likely to enter a nursing home after losing food assistance. If we do nothing, we also know that the time limits alone are expected to cause 4,000 avoidable deaths just in California among older adults and parents with kids by 2040. But California does not have to accept this, which is why we pitched AB 2299 and a coordinated budget ask that would have provided coverage for everyone losing CalFresh food assistance as a result of these cruel federal cuts. Unfortunately, as you can see in the slide, that budget ask did make it through the first round. It was accepted into the legislature's final budget, but it did not make it into the 3-house final budget agreement. So we are still continuing to fight for funding in August because it's critical that we keep people from going hungry. And we've now revised our ask to something that we think that the administration might find more feasible. So our current ask, which I'll send the letter out afterwards, and thank you to many of you who are already signed on, is to provide California Food Assistance Program benefits, so the existing CFAP program, provide those benefits to humanitarian immigrants losing access, and then to provide a family food supplement to stop child hunger among the families with children impacted by the time limits. So that's just a additional CalFresh benefit that families with children will receive if the parents get cut off. And I think I'm probably at time. Okay. So the reality is with HR1, the federal government cut $1.5 trillion from our food and healthcare benefits to fund $1.5 trillion in tax breaks for the ultra wealthy and major corporations. We are very lucky here in California to be in what I think is the most beautiful and prosperous state in this nation. And the progressive revenue solutions that Kel went over, along with these efforts that we've been discussing to strengthen our safety net, are really our chance to make that prosperity real for all Californians, not just the ultra wealthy, but for more than 500,000 people, for the veterans, the seniors, the families, the refugees who built and sustain our state and who are now being cut off from critical food assistance by the federal government. So thank you so much to everyone who's already signed on. And please reach out to me if you need any more information.
Great. I'll go next. Becca Gonzalez, also with the Western Center on Law and Poverty, here to talk about AB 1755, Sharp-Collins. This bill eliminates the 100-hour rule in CalWORKs, which punishes two-parent applicant families for working. As a way of general background, CalWORKs rules were adopted after welfare reform of the 1990s, which were based on racist and sexist assumptions about people receiving benefits. This bill is part of the Reimagine CalWORKs coalition work, which has worked to remove old policy in this program that are based on bogus assumptions and don't make sense. Under current law, a CalWORKs two-parent family applying for CalWORKs is denied aid simply because the primary wage earner works more than 100 hours in the month prior to application, even if they're income eligible for the program. This old welfare rule, known as the work penalty, assumes that working an average of 25 hours a week can generate enough income for a parent to provide for their family, and further assumes the family's income is above the eligibility threshold known as the minimum basic standard of adequate care. This old rule has served no good purpose but to punish hardworking families and harm children who are poor. California is one of only 4 states that still implements this regressive policy from the early 20th century. It is inhumane to subject impoverished families to this bureaucratic rule when good government indicates we treat them fairly, give them the services and supports they need, and judge them based on facts about their economic sufficiency. More importantly, policies that like these put families at risk of things such as homelessness. This bill, fortunately, has received some bipartisan support because everybody values the benefit of work and not punishing work. So this bill is currently in the Senate Appropriations Suspense file, and we hope everyone out there can support it. Thank you.
All right, I'm back to talk about AB 2564. This is Assemblymember Ward's bill to end the practice of surveillance pricing. The bill is co-sponsored by Tech Equity, Consumer Reports, and California Federation of Labor Unions. AB 2564 will ban the practice of surveillance pricing. This is where retailers gather personal data collected through electronic surveillance, either directly about your behavior, browsing on the retailer's website or your purchase history, but also they purchase thousands of other data points through data brokers, things like your income level, where you go and when you go there, your marital status, and tons of other personally identified information. Retailers are using these data points to create consumer profiles that predict a consumer's willingness or ability to pay for a product. So AB 2564 will ban the use of personal data to set customized prices while protecting transparently offered and consumer-friendly discounts and loyalty programs like student discounts or senior discounts, and allows for market-driven pricing discounts. Every California consumer right now is vulnerable to potentially paying more than their neighbor for groceries, school supplies, back to school clothes, and tons of other essentials that we all need. So this bill is really crucial at a time where Californians are facing a critical unaffordability crisis, and surveillance pricing costs consumers a lot. A Consumer Reports investigation found that Kroger, the grocery store, had created detailed shopper profiles using personal data, which would then be used to offer different prices to individual consumers based on their inferred willingness to pay. For Target, a Care 11 investigation found that Target's app had changed prices based on geolocation for individual consumers, charging the shopper more if they were already in the store, making the assumption that if they were there, they would buy no matter what the price was. This practice really harms consumers. An investigation by Consumer Reports using Instacart found that costs on grocery essentials could increase by about $1,200 over the course of the year for a family of four because of this personalized surveillance pricing practice. So we're really excited to be sponsoring this bill. I'll share more information in the chat about how you can keep up to date with what's happening with AB 2564. Thanks.
Thanks, Megan. Finally, we're going to round things out with our last pillar, protecting health and reproductive rights. Access to reproductive health care, access to gender affirming care, all of these things, the ability to make autonomous choices about our body is part of economic security as well. So this is our newest pillar, and we're glad to have it. We will be hearing from Lan Lei, policy advocate with Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Southern California, and Angela Ponte, Senior Vice President of Government Affairs with Planned Parenthood Affiliates of California.
Hi, everyone. Just for context, our organization provides direct services to over 15,000 organizations and individuals every year, many of whom are immigrants, survivors, low income, and have limited English proficiency. And that's why we're co-sponsoring AB 1542. Because it bans businesses from selling and sharing our sensitive personal information to third parties. And this is an important issue because currently businesses collect large amounts of sensitive personal information about us, including our immigration status, our health information, our social security numbers, and our precise location. And all of this data is being used to facilitate real-world harm, for example, immigration enforcement, targeting, fraud, and government surveillance. So there are several examples of this real-world harm. For example, how location data can be used to identify, investigate, and target individuals who are seeking abortion care. It can also reveal that someone visited an HIV clinic, a mental health provider, or an addiction treatment facility. And this all can lead to discrimination, harassment, and also discourage people from seeking healthcare altogether. It's also an urgent issue because of how this affects immigrants. For example, the Department of Homeland Security, including ICE, has been reported to purchase commercially available cell phone location data from data brokers rather than obtaining a warrant so that they can target immigrants. And there have been several reports that this commercially purchased location data was used to fuel the raids, the ICE raids that happened in Los Angeles. And for context, we have a healthcare access team, and our healthcare access program helps folks get enrolled in Covered California. And after the raids, we saw a 50% reduction in healthcare enrollment. This is also an issue that concerns survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and human trafficking. Because it's so easy to buy this information in the marketplace, it can increase the risk of stalking, harassment, or abuse by someone who's attempting to locate or monitor them. And this is also a demographic that we serve. As you can see, the consequences for sensitive personal information being sold and shared extend far beyond a loss of privacy. It can lead to harassment, stalking, threats to their personal safety. It also has a chilling effect on people that would discourage them from seeking out essential services. So this bill is currently in Senate Appropriations Committee, and we'd appreciate your support on this critical issue. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Angela Pontus from Planned Parenthood Affiliates of California. Happy to be able to share about one of our budget wins already accomplished this year for the Uncompensated Care Grant Program. This is a program that was originally started in 2022 following the Dobbs decision to help ensure that individuals could maintain access to contraception and abortion care, regardless of ability to pay if otherwise without healthcare coverage or eligibility for state healthcare programs, including Family Pact and Medi-Cal programs. So with an original $40 million investment in 2022, this program has served patients with contraception and abortion care in all 58 counties through both in-person and telehealth. At the end of 2025, nearly 200,000 clients received services from providers such as Planned Parenthood, but also independent providers, clinic networks, and local government agencies. So at the end of this current grant round, the 40 million original allocation would have ended. So without an allocation in this budget year, the program would have ceased to exist. Happy to report that $30 million to continue the program through the end of 2029 was included in the Budget Act, and that there was also language included in the health budget trailer to expand the program to also include coverage for gender affirming care services, which we're also seeing increasingly targeted by the federal government to ensure that individuals receiving gender affirming care can maintain access to that care if they lose coverage for it. So the funding was included in the budget and the program was expanded, and we're happy to be able to continue providing services in sexual and reproductive health care to those individuals that need it through this program. Also going to talk about a priority bill in the abortion access space, along with other co-sponsors. AB 1973 by Assemblymember Aguiar Curry proposes to remove restrictions in existing law for advanced practice clinicians, also known as APCs, to perform procedural abortions. Under existing law, there's an arbitrary restriction that only allows APCs to provide abortion care in the first trimester through aspiration techniques. And these limitations have been removed in other states, but can end up providing a barrier to access to individuals in more rural areas, or that show up to receive care, find out that they are just beyond the first trimester, and then need to reschedule their appointment for another time with a provider that can offer that care, when it's just further delaying care that is time sensitive. So this bill removes those restrictions and ensures that there's proper training and oversight and clinical competency for APCs to be trained to provide procedural abortion regardless of the gestational age in the law. This is particularly helpful in rural areas and medically underserved communities where access to abortion providers and physicians is already limited. The bill is currently in the Senate Appropriations Committee. It's not a suspense file candidate, so once the legislature comes back and the bill has its hearing and appropriations, it will move to the floor. There have been some concerns raised by stakeholders in this space, but the author's office and the other co-sponsors have worked very closely with those stakeholders to remove their concerns. So hopefully the bill continues moving along through the process smoothly, but any additional support for this proposal would be greatly appreciated.
Thanks, Angela. To wrap things up, just wanted to highlight a couple of other wins that we've already had so far in the budget space. One is $26 million to maintain access to gender affirming care. Angela mentioned that federal attacks are destabilizing access to gender affirming care, especially for transgender youth. California has the largest trans population in the nation, and this budget item will be used to create a state-only Medi-Cal funding pathway to ensure that care can be provided even if federal funding is cut, and also to provide targeted grants to stabilize the provision of healthcare across California. We also had a win in the victim services space, $50 million for victim service providers. The Federal Victim of Crime Act funding has been increasingly decreased in recent years, has been lowered in recent years, creating a real crisis for victim service providers across the nation. And here in California, these are folks that do everything from emergency housing to crisis support to counseling services. And so that $50 million will go there. Finally, we had some victories, or at least for now victories in the healthcare space in terms of short-term healthcare relief for immigrant families. So there were a lot of major cuts to Medi-Cal being contemplated leading up to the final budget. Many of those cuts have been delayed to July 2027, which gives us more time for advocacy. Some of those things include cutting dental benefits for certain immigrant populations, reducing the scale of coverage for what we would call humanitarian immigrants, so refugees, asylees, folks like that. Also, this is the lowered asset limit is not exclusive to immigrant populations, but that is essentially how many assets you can have and still qualify for Medi-Cal. Currently, that limit is at $130,000 for an individual. It was being contemplated to lower that to $2,000, and it has instead will be lowered to $21,000. So there's still a lot of work left to do in the budget space, but we like to celebrate wins where we can. So these are some good things that came out this year, and we're excited to support further advocacy in this space. We can move to the next slide. So in a miraculous turn of events, we actually have time left for questions. So I will be opening up our chat to have some questions from the audience. So if you have anything you want to ask, you can add that in the Q&A section. We also want to make sure that everyone knew how to get involved in supporting everything you heard about today and the rest of our agenda. We have an action team that sends out opportunities to support our priority bills. You see the link there. We'll also be circulating it after. You can also sign up for updates on Stronger California. And if your organization is potentially interested in joining Stronger California, you can reach out to us as well. So let me turn it over to questions. I see this one. How has the California legislature responded to current federal attacks? Do any of our presenters want to take that one?
I can start us off. As I started us off the beginning of the webinar, we as a Stronger California Network have been proud in our ability to pivot to respond to what can only be, classified as just direct onslaught and attacks from the federal government without appropriate oversight from Congress for obvious reasons. And I think especially last year's Stronger California agenda and now this year's as well has represented efforts to both combat and fight back against those attacks and try to strengthen the social safety net that is being decimated due to federal cuts that were, it's already precarious. And we've seen overall, I think, a lot of appetite amongst legislators to support these priorities that we in the Stronger California Network and our other allies in the advocacy community have been pushing. And while there is definitely room for more improvement and more, stronger resistance, there have been really important progress in strengthening budget protections like those that you heard about today and some of the last year's wins to ensure that vital domestic violence service protections and services, that safety net programs and CalWORKs are, at least the funding is at least not cut. And as you heard, there's still much more to do on that this year with especially hunger funding. And then on the legislative front, we have seen appetite from legislators to really fight back and protect, for example, our trans communities, our LGBTQ communities, and ensure that they're protected, to protect abortion and contraception and other reproductive rights. And so I think there is definitely room for more progress and more stronger policies supported by California legislators and the governor. But we've done a pretty good job. And I just want to flag that in the last 12 years, Stronger California has passed or helped to pass 66 bills and secure billions of dollars in budget funding. And in these current kind of during the current administration, we're going to push to increase those to better protect Californians and work with our legislator allies in that. And I see a second question. Yes, we will be circulating these slides as well as the links. And the goal of this really is to ensure that people are aware of these very important policies that are still moving and can take action to support them.
Thanks, Jess. We also have a question in the chat. Has the Department of Finance supported these bills or are they neutral? I think that might vary per bill, but does anyone want to speak to that for their bill?
I can just say that we don't know until, many of these bills are in appropriations, as you have all heard. And so we're kind of waiting to see what happens. But in personal experience, we have seen Department of Finance be a bit more open to the calculations and estimates that we believe are applicable. I know that is not across the board. So that's just in some of the experience that we've had this year. I'm not sure if any of the other presenters want to weigh in on that. Well, it remains to be seen what the outcome is in appropriations. And for those who are not familiar, the Department of Finance makes estimates of the costs of these types of bills. But again, we have faith in this legislature to understand the severity and how dire the situation is and the need to pass bills that help Californians, women and families and people across the state who need help more than ever in this current administration. And so I think we're hopeful that we'll have good turnout in appropriations and then in final floor votes.
Thanks, Jess. That was all of the questions in our Q&A. We have about a minute left, so if anyone wants to sneak in a question really quickly, we might have time to answer it. Otherwise, we'll wrap up. All right. Seeing none right now, just want to thank you all for your time. Again, just to echo what Jess said, we will be sending both the slides and all the links you saw today in a follow-up email. This was recorded, so you'll be getting that recording. If you know anyone who registered and wasn't able to make it, they're able to access the recording as well. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much to all of our presenters, and thank you so much for supporting Stronger California. We wouldn't be here without you. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.